Yeah, my name is Kevin Chen. So if you can turn to the next page, I guess disclaimer, next one. Yeah. So I'll just introduce myself briefly, and then we'll go to the topic about global macro economy, etc. So first, really appreciate the invitation to come to speak here. Boston is really one of my favorite cities, and I come here a lot. So I used to actually go to the Harvard University to teach twice per year. And they pay a little bit, but the only benefit was actually they told me that they always reserve a parking spot right up in front of the big Harvard Square. So they told me it's a huge privilege, and I really loved it. So, but summer to come to Boston, really very nice to see you. Really. So I guess match the previous speakers, but I'll try. And so, as my style, feel free to interrupt me at any time when I speak. I love to hear questions. And so my background, I got a PhD from University of Lausanne in Switzerland, and joined Morgan Stanley, and then moved to Chicago. And after 4 years, moved from Chicago to New York, and I've been in New York for the past 15 years. So I love this country. And when I was in Switzerland, they asked me, do you want to move to America? I said yes. But then I realized I've never studied a day in America. So when I came to New York, I said I need to have some more alumni. So I got in touch with NYU and signed up to be adjunct professor. So I've been adjunct professor for the past 12 years. And in between, also, I actually was a member of the faculty council, involved with hiring the deans, hiring tenure decision, and the new president come to NYU, etc. So very involved with NYU, and I love it. And over the years, I have students really all over the world. I feel like Harvard is a great university, but NYU is actually very international. They have 3 campuses: New York City, Shanghai, and Abu Dhabi. And there are 14 satellite campus, like in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. You probably don't know about all those. They have campus in Florence, Italy, and they have campus in Paris, London, and Buenos Aires, etc. So I have students from all over those countries. And now I travel a lot. Whenever I go to any country, I find some local students to meet, and like Qatar. And we have students actually. I actually launched a fintech company in Afghanistan, doing payment. We have students in Afghanistan, in Iraq, doing real estate development now. So it's amazing. And so yes, before that, I've been involved in a lot of organizations like Bretton Woods Committee, Economic Club, etc. So I guess I can speak about macro. Yes. Okay. So next page. Oh. Yeah. So, so first part of my talk would be about review of the first half of this year, and the next would be the second half would be about outlook going forward. Yeah, next page, please. I guess in every year, ever since I worked at Morgan Stanley, I write an article about the 10 expectations, 10 forecasts for next year. It's actually, I guess last year I wrote the 10 expectation for 2023, and one expectation I wrote was economic recovery and strong stock market, which was a lot of people criticized me end of last year. A lot of people remember, if you remember Morgan Stanley, Michael Wilson wrote an article saying that economy going to recession and the stock market is going to plunge 20% plus. And Goldman had a very negative view also. The whole Wall Street actually had a negative expectation for 2023. They were all expecting high, large layoffs. They were expecting recession. They were expecting bear market. And I wrote his article and I said, one of my expectations 2023 will be a strong economy. And there will be a lot of reasons. And so far, I guess, proved to be, I've been right. And I guess, against the consensus, right? Most of people are wrong usually in financial market. And why? Interesting things. I'll talk about some of the details, my personal, details. But one is, I guess, clearly this year, the U.S. economy has been continuing robust growth, very high growth. I share with you one story. In February, late February, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, came to Economic Club and gave a talk. And he said he has access of roughly 24 hours earlier than the general public, the highly confidential US economy data about job market. He said there was, when the January number came out, someone drove to his home, gave the number to him the evening, 24 hours before the official release. He was reading the number. I think it was 600,000 new jobs created in January. He said he was almost going to fall off his chair. He said the whole Wall Street was expecting 200,000. And the market did not know. And then he said, how can the economy to be so strong? 600,000 new jobs, right, in January. And it is, you know, I think there are many things, but clearly the job market is very strong. And when the job market is very strong, you have the consumption, right? If you can go to the next slide. The US economy, consumer is the driver of the economy. So in the US, and then, you know, 85% of the new jobs in the US are driven by the consumers, by service economy. So US is really about the service economy. 70% of GDP is driven by the consumer. And this is a chart I want to show you that, Atlanta Fed has a very interesting model called GDP Now. So usually every quarter, you know, you wait for 45 days, 30 days, you receive the GDP number, right? It's a surprise or not surprise, etc. Atlanta Fed, they do week. So every week they get all the data from market. You know, this week maybe car manufacturing number, next week import, next week consumption, all those. So every week they update all the number into the model and publish it. And this is what I want to show you. This blue chip consensus is from the whole Wall Street. You see most of people actually on Wall Street were expecting zero growth. Actually, beginning was slightly negative growth. And then until now, they have been expecting the whole year below 1%, very bad growth. But the top one is the one from Atlanta Fed, the weekly update. You can see right at the beginning, it's almost 2% growth and almost went to almost 3% and kind of updating up and down. So you can see that right now, you know, because the data is much faster than people experienced in the past. You can get much higher frequency data and get much better expectation versus what you would read in the news, in press, you know, let's say 45 days after end of quarter, there's a Labor Department would report the GDP. But in reality, you can see every week, and you can see the whole Wall Street is wrong pretty much all the way to the end. And then by the end of, you know, let's say by the end of, 45 days after quarter end, Wall Street would adjust up to fit into the real number. So that's why you see the economy is actually much better, but you can see actually in the media there's a lot of negative sentiment. So next page, please. And then of course, you know, the very big thing is about the Fed, right? The Fed has been hiking the rate very aggressively, 11 rate hikes so far. The quickest rate hike since 1970s. Again, you know, back to the same question, why, right? So the Federal Reserve Chair Powell, he said, I've never experienced this level of inflation except when I was 1970s, right? So when you have that high inflation, right, for the last, pretty much I think from 1980 on, the US never really had a very big inflation. The higher one was, you know, probably 2-3%. And around 2000, from 2008 on, pretty much zero. I remember I attended those conferences in Wall Street and at BlackRock when you have all the top economists getting together. The big complaint is always why inflation is always below expectation. For the last 30, 40 years, it's always, the Fed had a target of 2%, 2% inflation, and then 2% interest rate, and then 4% nominal GDP. That's ideal, golden standard, right? And for the past 30, 40 years until COVID happened, the US inflation roughly is always about 1%. It has always been below 2, roughly around 0 to 1%. So But for the last 2-3 years, the inflation really went through the roof, right? And you saw like what's called the like truck drivers, they had a strike, and then salary went up 30%, right? So all those very high inflation caused the Fed would have to hike the rate. But when this very aggressive rate hike, of course, it hurt a lot of sectors I will talk about later on. But on the other hand, rate hike is actually not necessarily a bad thing too, because high interest rate, in fact, would usually, there's a good part, which is it will kill excess capacity. A lot of companies will shut down when the interest rate is very high. You have usually much less competition. Which means the company's profit usually would go up. So people always think about high interest rate as negative thing, which is not true. I wrote articles before and I got into trouble because a lot of people think I was crazy. Because when you have higher interest rate, another benefit is actually the retired people or people who are on fixed income in the US or globally. The fixed income, the pensioners, etc., they got much higher income. Versus zero interest rate, when now if you can get 3 or 5 or 6% CD rate, those guys who saved a lot of money, they have a lot more cash income now and they can spend. So higher interest rate actually for the senior citizens, they are spending, consumption power went up a lot. In the US, it's hundreds of billions of dollars more money for them to spend. And also higher interest rate kills a lot of, I would say, inefficient competition. So there will be a lot of competition goes out of business, and for those stay, they can increase margin and they make a much better profit, which is what you're seeing in the stock market now too. So higher interest rate usually is, people think it's negative, but actually quite often it's a positive thing too. I was give another example, and zero interest rate, negative interest rate is not necessarily a good thing either. One good example is Japan, right? Japan has been doing zero interest rate for 30-40 years. They have been, lost 30-40 years, no growth, zero negative growth for 30-40 years in Japan. So, why? Because when there's a zero interest rate, everyone can borrow money for free. You can invest for free. You can, those zombie company can stay zombie forever, which means they're going to produce good and service without thinking about profit, and which is very, very bad for the society. The society basically is stagnant there forever. So, yeah. So next page, please. And then, yes, next one. And then this is interesting part I want to mention. Whatever your political view is in the US, right? I know people support all kinds of different views, but in my opinion, the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, is extremely, extremely good for the economy in the US. So as an NYU adjunct professor, once per year, no, I have a grant that I cannot take some money, but I can travel to any academic conference of my choice once per year. I can pick one, any places, and just to go there study. So last year, I picked up the one out of all the places, West Virginia, which is actually Department of Energy organized a summit about the what's called reinvestment in the U.S. renewable energy, etc. in West Virginia. And the Energy Department Secretary says they were all there. They talked about the IRA impact. Clearly, you see the reason why, because it's a little misleading to call it Inflation Reduction Act. But in reality, I would call it really a Invest in the U.S. Act, because of the IRA came in essentially since then, since I would say November last year, when it was officially went into effective, the U.S. manufacturing investment went up 6 times. So in the U.S., usually per month investment used to be something like 20 billion, and now it's 120 billion. Okay. Okay, good. So the Inflation Reduction Act caused a huge surge of investment since last year, and recently it even accelerated. I saw the data every month from March, April, May on. It went up per month at roughly what it was per month in the past. So we are running at something like 6 times average investment for the last 30 years in the US. So for pretty much for the last 30 years, it was average at this level, and now we're 6 times. Of course, it's not sustainable. I don't think it will sustain like this. However, at this current level, it created a lot of jobs and it created a lot of investment, but also consumption too. So, so this IRA is really, everyone should pay attention. But on the other hand, I think I heard a lot of complaining because people, not only in Asia, but people in Europe, they are very worried now too, because you see a lot of companies in Asia, in Europe, they are moving their whole factory to the US now because of IRA. The Inflation Reduction Act forced those companies to manufacture here from high end, of course, but cars, washing machine, microwave, and you wouldn't even imagine even your sneakers, shoes, clothes, etc., are being made in the US now because of the IRA. And so it's very good for the US, but I think a lot of countries right now are suffering. But that's why you see, hopefully there will be some rebalance going forward too. Yeah, next page, please. And then, the first part of this year, very important thing is inflation declined rapidly. Amazingly, you see that it peaked in roughly Q3 last year, 9% inflation, right? Remember, that was also the lowest point for the stock market. Remember, last year, S&P dropped 20%, the NASDAQ dropped 30% plus. Big bear market last year. And pretty much since inflation has peaked and, declined rapidly from 9.8 all the way now to 4, and most recent is 3.2%. With a rapid reduction of inflation, in fact, the stock market surged too. So that's a very classical example of when you have inflation going down, the companies, in fact, they are able to, the margin goes up. So that's why right now the stock market is very, very strong too. So next page, please. And then this is actually a quantitative kind of decomposition of the stock market return. You all know that stock market this year is very strong, right? S&P returned 19%, NASDAQ returned 30%. A lot of people made a lot of money this year. And but you can see the breakdown, 19% S&P, where does it from? Growth contribution to the S&P is actually negative 0.5%. Why? Because the stock market companies' total earning actually slightly went down this year. And then US dollar, in fact, this year depreciated a bit. If you remember, the euro appreciated a bit. So the currency conversion contributed 8.9%. And then Fed policy, which is higher interest rate cost, higher what's called finance cost, borrowing costs, etc., reduced 7.8% gain from S&P. And then financial stress. Remember Silicon Valley Bank, all those banking issues this year, bank problems. Many regional banks are in trouble now, right? That actually because of the financial stress, the Fed had to release some liquidity, helped 7.6%. And last part, sentiment, 11% contributed. So why? Because basically, since pretty much February on, the sentiment in the US is actually very, very strong. So people were very worried last year, but kind of flipped. So this year, the sentiment is strong. So that's, you see the gains and losses this year in total, that's a contribution to the 19% gain. Out of that, actually 11% is from sentiment. So, and then, so that's the breakdown. And next page, please. And I want to mention also, first half of this year, there was actually a banking crisis, even though it's a mini banking crisis, but it was a banking crisis. All the banks started with got into trouble. First was a Silvergate Bank in San Diego was shut down because they were doing cryptocurrency. And then after that was Silicon Valley. And then New York, it was Signature Bank who does New York real estate lending. And also, Credit Suisse is gone too. Credit Suisse is a bank of more than 150 years history. It's one of the most important banks in the world, top 30 systematic important bank in the world. And so the banking crisis, despite it's kind of controlled, but it has made a huge impact. Pretty much it's a permanent damage. Since then, the US banking system has been cutting lending. So if you're a real estate developer, you would not be able to borrow money easily now. If you are a consumer, your borrowing cost has gone up a lot. And basically, there's a chart. I don't have time to bring here, but you can see that when Silicon Valley Bank shut down, the total U.S. banking system lending start to go down, and it has never recovered. So the banking crisis this year is real. And I know a lot of people on Wall Street and Silicon Valley, in California, in New York, they're all having very unrealistic expectation. They have a lot of investment, like office building, etc., losing money. They are having trouble to pay, interest and all those, but they're holding on to it because they think the Fed will cut rate by the end of this year. If I can hold for another 3 months, if I can hold for another 6 months, things will be okay. And I always remind them that you cannot be hopeful like this. It's not going to go back to zero interest rate. The banking system is different now. They're not going to go back. So they're not going to go back to lend a lot more money like last year. They will demand a lot of collateral. They will have much higher interest rate. So, for people right now, if they are still having a negative cash flow investment, they should cut the loss. Because hope things will turn around, Fed will come back to rescue you, cut interest rate and all those, not going to happen. Yes, next page, please. And last, yes, if you can go back. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, next. Yeah, also this year, a big thing is actually oil and natural gas in bear market. If you check the natural gas price, right now it's back to the price of 3 years ago. So natural gas price went down 70%. So it's actually a big movement in the market too. Yeah, next one, please. And then for the stock market, in fact, I have to say that AI, artificial intelligence, right now is the only investment thesis in the market. S&P 500 stocks, there are roughly 11 stocks that are AI related, Microsoft, NVIDIA, etc., and Tesla. You take those 11 stocks out, everything else is negative. So the whole market is good if you bought index, in particular if you bought NASDAQ. But without those 11 AI stock, everything else you'll be negative. So everything is AI now, without doubt. Without AI, nothing else is really, making much progress. I was in California recently. There's a new AI company being formed by some French capital. They raised 100 million. I asked them, what do you do? They said, we just use 100 million to buy 100 million worth of NVIDIA chips. And that's it. And then I said, what about the chips? And he said the chips will be invested, used for our AI, operation, right? And then the money will be in NVIDIA. NVIDIA will be using money for Silicon Valley, follow-up consumption, dividend, all those. So basically, everything 100% is in AI. They raise 100 million. They use that for chip. That's it. Nothing else. So, yeah, next page, please. And then last part for this year I want to mention is that Warren Buffett. So I go to Warren Buffett annual meeting every year. Every year he speaks greatly. And this year, amazing, he talked about Japan, right? And he even went to Japan as, he's 95 or 94. And to travel to Japan and go to, all those places, show support. I mean, whatever, you think about Japan, Warren Buffett basically started this wave, and now the whole world is investing in Japan. I was told that now you go to Japan, you see all the American investors are in Japan because they're all following Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett is leading by example because he put 50 billion there. He already got 100 billion profit. So more than 2 times. And also apparently he said his investment in Japan will be, he said my investment horizon is 10 to 15 years. And he's 94, right? Think about this. So it's almost like he wants to invest forever there. So this level of commitment, really, I think, you know, the timing is perfect. After he went there, everyone went there. So yeah, so first half of this year, the biggest star is Japan, actually. The stock market in Japan, everything you see surging. Yeah, so next page, please. And then let's have a look outlook going forward, second half and beyond, please. Next one. I would say still a lot of people are talking about the recession. They're talking about, you know, slowing down, layoff, a lot of trouble and all those defaults. I think the number one is job market. As long as the job market is strong, the US economy will not go into a recession. And the job market, now it's less stronger, that's for sure. I know that over the long term, the US with the population also roughly is 200,000 new jobs per month. As long as the US is generating 200,000 jobs per month, the economy will not go into recession. And beginning of this year, I remember 600,000. That's way too overheating. And I believe it went down from 600 to 543. Right now, it's 350,000 jobs, new job per month being created. So it's not bad at all. However, a lot of high paid jobs got laid off. So if you look at Wall Street, like Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, they're all laying off people. I personally know a lot of people got laid off because all these are very, I asked them why. They told me the reason is we're making too much money. So they're laying off all the MDs and the top partners, etc. And then at the same time, they're hiring a lot of young people. That's why you see the total new jobs are increasing, but the higher paid jobs are disappearing. And the same thing is happening in Silicon Valley too. I was told like Google laid off like 20,000 people, Microsoft laid off 3,000, 5,000, Facebook laid off 20,000 people. But it's not that they laid off people just like that, because in the meantime, they hired another 10,000 people. But they are basically hiring fresh graduates, much cheaper, engineers, etc. And they laid off a lot of managers and senior executives. So yes, that's why they're saving a lot of money. Stock price is going up because they are more profitable now, like Microsoft. However, the top paid jobs are gone. They are not coming back, I was told. So I think it's problematic. It's uneven. Eventually, it will be very bad. But for now, you're not seeing much impact because people got laid off. They are very rich, so they probably they're not worried about any financial difficulties, and they are hiring a lot of young people from fresh graduates and all those. So that's why right now the economy is still strong. But you need to know that the underlying the surface structurally is changing. And it's not very pretty for the top high earners right now. Okay, next page. And then the interest rate. Everyone is interested in talking about the interest rate, right? I personally believe the Fed they want to hike more. Federal Reserve chairman, board members, governors. They come to New York. They come to our breakfast, lunch, dinner all the time. They talk about more hikes, but I think that's just talk. I think the U.S. economy, 6%, that's the limit. And one more hike, that's about it. And after that, probably rate cut. Why? Because the nominal GDP in the U.S. right now is growing at 4.7%. And over the long term, you cannot have an interest rate to be higher than the nominal GDP growth. Nominal GDP is the number that basically you take out interest rate. Below that, 4.7%, you take our interest rate 3.2%, and net U.S. economy right now is growing roughly 1.8, 1.7%, right? So 1.7%, which means that's the real GDP growth. And the interest rate right now is 5.5%. It's way, way higher than the nominal GDP. It's not sustainable. If it continues 2-3 more years, we're going to have an economic collapse. So, but that's why they are talking about it, but I don't think they will. They won't even keep at this high interest rate for very long. I think they're going to cut the rate, but they will not cut to zero. They're going to do something, what's called, the Fed has always, what's called the Federal Reserve. They will talk about if they have a dream, if their dream world is, GDP growth 1 to 2%, and then, and then inflation, let's say 2% target, which means their nominal GDP growth 3 to 4%, and interest rate roughly 3%. And that's the ideal economy in the world. And that's what's called the Federal Reserve. They talk about if they have all the central bank governors in the whole world sit down in a room together, everyone close their eyes, and then they say, let's now open the eyes, every country make interest to 3%, that'll be perfect. That will be like harmony in the whole world peace. But that's not going to happen. And but it's not going to be more than 6%, because that's also, you hear like Bridgewater, Ray Dalio, he gives a lot of talks. So Ray Dalio always talk about when the interest rate is above 6%, the economy will break, things will break. And so right now it's 5.5%. And I think the peak is not 5.75%. That's about it. And I think no president in America, no senior leaders in this country wants the economy to be in a recession or to break the economy. So 5.75% for a couple of months, everyone kind of feels some more pain. And after that, the interest rate cut, and cut probably to an ideally for 4.5%. And that's like ideal world. Yeah. So yeah, next slide. And then corporate earnings are down right now in January. If you look at the whole S&P, right, down 6 to 9%, just open Q2 this year. But it's not too bad, because if you read the Wall Street, those investment banks forecast, remember they were forecasting something like 20 to 30% drop of earning. Morgan Stanley, they talked about expected what's called earnings drop of 30%. And so, it's bad, but it's not as bad as people were expecting. And of course, there are some banks are hurting, like Goldman. I think this morning there was an article that the former CEO of Goldman, Lloyd Blankfein, called the current Goldman CEO. He said, "You are not doing a good job. My stocks at Goldman lost 50 million this year. Go to get your stock price up." And I believe Q2 Goldman's earning declined 65%. So Goldman is not doing well. And many banks are not doing well. And you know that, because high interest rate, and then, the default, the bad loans and all those, Wells Fargo, they all not doing very well. But the bad earnings from banks are pretty much offset by the good earnings from tech names. What's called Amazon, Google, Facebook, they laid off so many people that they are saving so much money. They are doing so well now. So that kind of tech pretty much offset the finance loss. Next page, please. And then also I want to show you, America is actually very interesting that, I've been living in America for 20 years. I found America is very different now versus before. I remember when I just moved to America back in Chicago 15, 20 years ago, everyone just spent. In the weekend, they hop on a plane, go to Las Vegas to gamble. And they spend. I was shocked. How can people spend like this? But I think since COVID happened, I think the whole mentality of society in America changed. This is a breakdown of Gen Z, old millennial, baby boomer, and then Gen X and all those. You see pretty much around 2020 on, there's a structural change of saving. Everyone starts to save money in America. Old people, young people, and they're saving a lot of money. Apparently they spent some, but they did not spend a lot more. So structure, America's saving rate is much, much higher. I think I saw some statistics much higher than Asian countries now, much higher than China, much higher than Europe. So America is actually a country saving a lot of money now. So with all those savings, that's why the economy is much more resilient, because when you have saving, you're not worried too much about, I might be, if I don't get a paycheck next month, I might be kicked out of the home, right? I remember I think back in 2001, 2002, when there was this, dot-com bubble burst, a lot of people, they were like, I'm like 1 or 2 months out, from street because, I don't have any savings but now it seems people have saved quite some money now. So, and a structural change. Of course, it might change again, right? If the economy continues to do well like this, maybe for another 3-4 years, people will forget about it. They'll start to become again like before. America has pretty much zero saving rate or negative saving rate. And people used to just make the difference by using credit card to borrow. But the structural saving is very different now versus before. Yeah, next page, please. And then, talk about recession, right? So this is from 1950 till now. For the last 70 plus years, Federal Reserve had a rate hiking cycle of 15 times rate hiking cycles, just like now. Out of that, 11 hikes end up in recession, and 4 hikes end up with soft landing. And so most of people expect this time to be in recession. And but to me, it looks like we might actually have a soft landing, but it's not unprecedented in the sense that roughly 1 out of 3 chances, so 30% chance you end up with a soft landing. So so the Fed could engineer a soft landing again now, just like in 1994. So soft landing is possible. It's happening now, I think. Yeah. And next, and then I would say right now, the biggest trouble in the U.S. is commercial commercial real estate market. So you guys probably not familiar with, but New York and San Francisco are the 2 cities have biggest, commercial real estate problem. Right now, they are marked down by 50%. And in San Francisco, some of the prime location hotels, office buildings are marked down by 80%. And all those huge markdown is creating a lot of risk for lenders. Banks are having a lot of bad loans. They're still holding on to it. And I remember New York City, they had a discussion. They asked all the leaders of the financial committee in New York City what to do. And one of the conclusions they said is that probably another 3 to 4 years before the office market recover. And then the reason is, work from home right now is a structural problem. Most of the companies not back to full-time in the office, at least 1 day from home. And I heard a lot of places 2, 3, 4 days working from home. They go to office once per week. I heard in Washington, D.C. right now, federal government buildings are only 20% occupancy rate. And they're not expecting people to be back full-time ever. Looks like it's going to be structural. It will be a structural, they're talking about 4 days working week or 3 days working week. Whatever number you choose, you end up with excess office space. There'll be a lot of buildings will be empty. And so work from home, it's a structural problem. It's not going to be resolved. I think people are expecting, I heard a lot of places, if you force young people to go to office 5 times per week, they quit. So, yeah. And then, another thing is the long-term people, they are moving to the South. I see, Carolinas, Florida, Texas, the real estate doing very well because population moves there, they got all the need there. And sectors, we see the good, stronger sectors, good for investments. One is data center because people are using a lot more streaming, online shopping, and all those. Data centers are being built everywhere. Logistics, I think more and more people are really getting used to buy grocery, everything online, which means more delivery need, more logistics centers, those 3, 4 floors building with AI robots inside to do delivery, packaging, all those. And healthcare, another major investment going forward too, because I think I see a lot of details of our structural need for healthcare. Yeah, next page. And this is one example, right? Traditional real estate now in the US accounting only 40% of investments. And then more than new real estate investments are 6%. So the traditionals are pretty much, what's called office, retail, residential, industrial, less and less investments. And more investments are in cell phone tower, data center, hotel, gaming, storage, etc. Health. So that's really the new sectors becoming the majority. Next page, please. And then another, I guess, right now I think is clearly geopolitical risk are concerning. And one is, the war in Ukraine already caused economic recession in Europe. Right now, Germany, France, Italy, all the European Union as a bloc is already in an economic recession. And I was just in London, Paris recently, and in London, they barely kind of avoided recession. They grow like 0.1%. But they might actually, slip into recession again too. So Europe is already in recession. And then in emerging markets right now is a big problem of currency. Why? Because when the interest rate in the US is so high, you can imagine globally all the money are coming to the US now. I was in Singapore, the local fund manager told me we're suffering. I said, why? They told me, our real estate, the most I can do is 5% for investors. That's already, I have to work very, very hard to get the prime location, all those built 5%. And you guys in the US, you have a deposit of 6%. Risk-free rate. How are we going to compete? That's why you see all the money are coming from Singapore to the US. The underlying logic is the same. If you have risk-free rate here at 6%, and then your risk rate is, let's say commercial, and also right now you're looking for cap rate or, the what's called loans, and also 9%, 10%, 11%. How can other countries compete? Which means, all those emerging markets countries are hurting, and they are seeing capital outflow, and they are seeing currency depreciation globally. Every country right now versus the US. And so that's a risk, because when emerging market, I talk to people, I think the biggest risk is if the US economy is going to go into recession, it's most likely not going to be triggered by anything here, but it's going to be triggered by recession and slowing down other countries. So that's the risk, and I think that's probably the big risk going forward, in particular 2024, because a lot of those default right now is happening. Yeah. Next page. So the summary, right? And I think number one is, I guess, recession is less likely to happen, at least for the next 12 months. So I think clearly, it's a kind of soft landing happening now. You see all the statistics. There's no denying about it. Second is that still need to control risk, because a lot of people are still hoping that the rate will go down. They think because for the last pretty much 15 years, the US has been running zero to, in reality, zero interest rate or negative interest rate, because, a lot of places you can, banking, all those are pretty much free money, right? They're a lot of people are hoping will go back to that. And my answer is no. It's not going to be, don't hope that the rate will go down and you can refinance at a lower rate. It's not going to happen. So the risk is you still need to control the risk, because high interest rate will stay. I think US is just going back to the traditional, reasonably, priced interest rate, which is, I would say 4% range instead of 0. And then the risk could really be from outside of the US. That's why you see all those money coming in now. And then long term, I think demographics in the US is actually very good. Last year, I think more than 1 million new, what's called skilled labor joined because of demographic change, and which is much better, let's say, versus Europe or in a lot of Asian countries. And so that's really, I would say that's my conclusion. And feel free to stay in touch, Twitter or LinkedIn. And then next page, I guess it's a summary. So any questions? Yes.
So now I want to ask you, actually did very well. I want to ask you, how does this affect small businesses when they need to get loans, the SBA or get loans from banks, after banks have a problem?
It's very tough. It's very tough. I've students who work for the small business administration, and I was told right now, in fact, I think the bankruptcy rate in the US is picking up again because the small business, they borrow from small banks, regional banks, and regional banks, a lot of them are in trouble. They are either shrinking the balance sheet or they are trying to merge with others. They're controlling exposure and all those. So for small business, it's tough. That's why I think you have to rely on the business internal growth, cash flow generated from the business itself instead of from borrowing. In the past, you can borrow to grow, but not anymore. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Please. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your speech today. I have an online car company. We're very interest rate sensitive. Also, which way are interest rates going? Are they going to keep raising them?
Yeah, I know. We actually worked, some insurance, some online car marketplace. Some of them they work with insurance companies, etc. I saw a lot of statistics. Yeah, the interest rate I think is not likely to go up a lot more. I think probably one more hike, and then we'll. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I see the Mannheim data, right? Mannheim. Yeah. That data I saw the number is going down. I see it every week. Yes. Yes. It's that's in fact the used car price surge was a big part of the inflation in the US for the last 2 years, and now it's going down. It's a big part for the inflation decline. Yes. Yeah, I think the supply is going up and the demand is softening, and I think the rate could actually, go down. No, I'm going to stay at this level, and then the Fed could cut a bit, but not too much.
Well, I think demand is at least in the used car market, it's more affected by unemployment. They have a job, they're not super rich. It's only a couple dollars a month.
Yes.
That's
Oh yeah. That's what I showed the data. The employment number is very strong, still very strong. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
You see inflation is continuing to trend down. What factors would play the watch?
Sure. That's a great question. I have a very controversial view, and people got mad at this view to me. When people ask me about inflation, I always tell them I read a lot, right? I read human history for thousands of years. Deflation is human norm. For human history, usually it's always deflation. Inflation is always short term, hike spikes a bit and then decline. Why? Because human society ultimately is always, there's always a wealth gap, and then usually. When the inflation really caused by wage growth, and usually for a lot of societies, when the wage kind of when the wealth gap start to go wider, usually the inflation goes down and eventually end up in a deflation. And also society always try to innovate. Innovation is always a killer for inflation. So my view is that inflation over the long term, it will be dead. The government can print, but it's not going to translate into liquidity. And you give another $1 million to Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, they're not going to spend the money. And all the stimulation happened the last 2 years and really drove up inflation, but it was all temporary. So it's not going to, create long term. And also, and you see that in China, it's quite much already deflation. And many other countries, they are going to be more competitive to cut price. That will all translate into lower price in the US too. Yeah, and there's a lot of structural things like, if you look at the airplane tickets, it's going down now again. And then what's called energy price, earning food, etc. So ultimately, my view is that human society, always the problem is deflation. And inflation is not a problem, but short term, yes. Yeah. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I can hear.
I saw you, the prediction for the next 12 months will have kind of soft landing. But, I heard of you also said, some small banks got a problem. That's reflect me to, 2008 or the sub-market or subprime lendings that triggered the whole slight, downing to the inflation or whatever, the recession.
Yes.
So my question is right now is in the, next year will be election year. I hate to say that, but sometime to me that when you get to the election year, the market normally should be generally stable, right? As you predicted, similar to what we can see. So next year will be election. So from here to there, and I think only something can trigger from whatever you can see from the small banking industry could be, trickle down or domino, effect could be. So other things could be also triggered inflation or the recession between now and the election day or something you can predict or.
Yeah, sure. I think the big risk is actually, geopolitical risk, right? And but in the U.S., yes, the regional banks, the smaller regional banks are in trouble for sure. They're cutting their lending. They're lending less, and they're taking they're calling the loans back, etc. However, I see the solution already right now. It's happening right now. It's private lending. So Wall Street right now is the hottest fund, the hottest investment. Wall Street always overheat, always do something like mad or something crazy. And for the last 2-3 years, and I think for the next 2-3 years, Wall Street is the hottest thing is private lending. You see Blackstone doing this, you see KKR doing this. A lot of hedge funds are launching a vehicle called private lending vehicle. What is private lending? To me, private lending, it is just a banking business, but without a banking license. They're doing, but this private lending vehicles, from Blackstone, from KKR, from all the big hedge funds, smaller hedge funds, what they do is they lend to small business, they lend to large business. They compete directly versus JP Morgan. They compete directly versus regional banks. So they are providing this credit function. The only difference is those private lending vehicles funds, they don't take deposit. They don't take retail money, but they raise a lot of money from institutional investors, from pension funds. Right now, if you talk about investing in stocks, or just hot hedge funds raising money, right? But if you talk to any Wall Street institutions, right now the hottest thing is private lending. What do? They're just taking. If you think about macro, big picture point of view, is that they are just taking the space that's left out by the banks. Essentially, they are lending to law firms. You can believe that law firms are having trouble to borrow money now because law firm doesn't have collaterals, and lawyers, they don't have stable income, right? Their payout is every now and then a big settlement and all those. So law firms are borrowing money. Where do they borrow money from? They borrow money from private lenders, private lending vehicles. And so basically the part that's, the small banks are retreating from it, and then the private lenders, they're lending out. So that's pretty much, I guess, at least for now, solve the problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you very much. I think it's time is up, right? Okay, all right.
To share.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin, and thank you to come.
Sure.
I like your lecture very much, but I have a few reflections, comments before our president, Li will say something. Then we'll do the closing.
Okay.
Nice talk, and we learn a lot. And I think a lot of people consider interest rate real high. When I get into this business in 2000, the interest rate is start like 8 point something. And then within like a couple months, 2% down to 6%. I still remember, but the people's getting used to low interest for 20 years. A lot of consumers get a benefit.
Yes.
But actually, a high interest rate, it's really good for the insurance industry.
Totally.
So according to the lecture, say all the Wall Street prediction maybe it's wrong. As a consumer, because the fixed rate probably around like 5%, you can get CD, and you predict the market could be strong. Should we time in the market? But I don't suggest. What's your opinion?
Yeah,
strategy.
Sure. But if you look at just randomly, you check any bank, right? 2 years CD, let's say JP Morgan right now is I think 4%. So what they're saying is that they're expecting on average for the next 2 years, it will be let's say if now it's 5%, if you buy a CD for 2 years 4%, which means next year they're expecting rate to be 3% after next year. So the Wall Street, they themselves as they're expecting some lower rate. So market timing is tough, but I think I think depend different industries. If you know a sector well, I think you can invest well. I actually know some professors that are very, very good investors. I know some professors here, they're very good investors. I know some those sector specialists like guys in biotech space. They can invest very, very well. They know which companies are doing well with a new drug development, and they're seeing big trend of more, let's say coverage from Medicare, etc. So I think depend on sectors. And energy sectors, there are some very good investors. But in general, just to time the whole market is tough, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I like to share 4 points in response to your lecture today. But thank you. I like your lecture very much. It inspires. Okay, and first of all, I think recently a famous artist Len Jun come here, and many people come here for a lecture. I think Len Jun is an artist. His art, one piece of art sell for $40 million. It's one of the in the modern art world is use his art skills and also use his observation and the values to really convey beauty to I think in many sense I also think artists is a diplomats to connect cultures. But one thing I think shares what you said today about Japan. I think when Len Jun talk about Japan is interesting because Japan is a country, is a place, is doing very, very good job on integration. Japan in Asia, and it's a very good representative for the countries in Asia in terms of Asian cultures. And the Asian cultures, many people here are Asians. They are very, for example, Chinese medicine, we are trying to do education program on that. So Chinese medicine may be rooted from China, but Japan doing a very good job in education and the practice. But also Japan, I think they learn very well from their failure, and they will learn very well about the modern business. So, and the values. So Japan become, I think, a leader in integration in values, in cultures and business. So I think that's also like with Karen about every year is going to visit to go to hear what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger has to say. And the President Li and I also often go there. Hopefully next year, more people in this room will join our delegation. Maybe Nani will come, right? Maybe Jill will come, maybe Kevin and Kathleen will come too.
I think we don't have to go anymore. We have this here is another.
Yeah, we can hear a new version.
All right.
Yeah.
What topic is really we care about. So, but anyway, thank you very much for inviting us.
Yeah. So, and every year I lead a delegation to go. And the friends and investors, if anybody want to go, please let us know because seats are limited. This is the first. Another thing is about the interest rate. Recently, I had a privilege and honor to have a dinner with President Larry Summers. He was, everybody know who is Larry Summers. I only ask one question. President Summers, what do you think about interest rate? He says, up. Okay.
Yes.
So I think, when I first invest in real estate, that's in the middle 90s, the interest rate was 25, 18%, 12%, but now we are paying maybe 6%. So I think everybody wants the interest rate to be low. We all want, but I think today I learned from Kevin. He said actually good interest rate possibly is a healthy thing for our economy. We only can do well if the economy is normal, right? So I think when high interest rate environment for business operators, a lot of us are business operators, no matter you operate a government or military office or, education agency or, whatever. I think high interest rate and inspires innovations. You need to be more innovative, and you need to have, more tools in your toolbox. So I think, like sometimes you go to class, you have easy class, it's easy to pass, it's fail and pass. But sometimes you have very strict teachers, like recently Charles Aldrich, Professor Aldrich from Harvard Law School passed, and he was a criminal professor. I think he is so famous in Harvard Law School and teach most difficult class, but his students, including President Obama, myself too, I think a tough teacher can be good, and a tough market regulator can be a healthy thing for us, right? So that's the second observation. Okay, let's see. But anyway, and the next lecture will be real estate, and Grace is the hotel operators, So he will share more about the real estate in the high interest rate and the observation. And also, I think another thing I'd like to share, last time I went to hear Warren Buffett, he said, have to invest. Everybody have time, money, and resources, how to invest. He said something I think may be useful to share here. And what he said, if you are the largest portfolio holder for real estate, for market, for apartments, tell me. I'll buy 1% from you right now, $30 million. I'm ready to invest in your business. But if you're also largest portfolio holders for farming land, I'm ready. I have a check for you. I'll buy 1% of your business. So what I say is, when we invest our time to study, we invest money to buy stock market, financial things. I think give priority to assets. Assets-based operating. The farming land, people are always going to eat, right? So like here, this summer we're doing the summer school. I cannot not to call the food company. They have to deliver. If we don't have much fancy things, I need and rice. This is needed. Apartment. So we have friends over. If you have apartment, put them. That's the first thing. Other thing, fancy or not, I think focus on assets. Fundamental assets is so critical. Number 4 point is about profit lending. This time, and Committee 100 co-founder Henry Tang couldn't come. But I think when I met him, he always talk about trust and comfortable. How you can really build your business as a leader, build your business as build your team as a leader. The critical two words he says is trust and comfortable. So I think the private lending is trust. A lot of people talk about, oh yeah, if you have a building, have a collateral, okay, I lend it to you with a banking license, 4%, 5%, 6%. But the private lending, I think in this market, is hard to have good reasons. But how you can get the money is trust. If you have a building, people see it. But how you get the trust? That's so difficult, right? But the trust above all. I think President Lee always talk about trust, how to use trust as a vehicle for wealth management, but I think also for lending, trust is everything. Also, in the private lending, another very, very big element is comfortable. People trust you. Can they be comfortable with you? In the law firm try to borrowing, how do you do it? So I just wanted to share these few things I've been, reflecting from your lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you for Professor Kevin Chen for your insight. That's really insight of the current economy and the market. Thank you very much. Thank you.